Okay, we'll call this meeting to order at 6:34. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up would be correspondence or public comments. We do have Lisa visiting us. Do you have any comments, or are you just observing?
Thank you. I'm just observing tonight. Nice to see you all, and Happy New Year. Thank you for your work.
You as well. Thank you.
Good luck with your work tomorrow, Lisa.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Okay, then next up would be agenda review. Any amendments? I have none.
Nope.
None. Okay, perfect. So next up would be a consent agenda. I would look for a motion to approve the meetings from December 15th. Terry's a first. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving December 15th minutes, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Okay, next up will be our reports from the administration, and first up will be MVU.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start us off this evening. Before I share the principal's report with the group, Julie asked me to share with you that MVU has been nominated to participate in something called the Canopy Project. She included a document about that in your drive, so I urge you to look at it. Just wanted to share a little bit about the Canopy Project with you. We were nominated by Pat Fitzsimmons, who is the proficiency-based learning team leader at the AOE, and her nomination of us was rooted in our equity literacy work. She was the leader or the support person from the AOE for our equity literacy grant that we received last year. And so the Canopy Project is a national collective that focuses on highlighting innovative schools across the country to create a network so that schools can collaborate, grow, and learn together, which is really exciting. This year, the project has focused on schools that have adapted to COVID in unique ways and how they're working to actively fight against racism. And the Canopy Project is committed to surfacing a more diverse set of innovative schools. So we really appreciated being recognized, not just by Pat, but also by the Canopy Project. It's nice to get a little recognition for some of our work. Some of the things that are highlighted in our nomination, which you will be able to see in the drive, our hybrid model for the COVID situation, the proficiency-based graduation requirements work that we've done, including our work around proficiency-based grading, the equity literacy work that we've been doing over the past year or so with our diversity, equity, and inclusion group, and the work of the school district around SEL. So we're very excited about it. If you have questions, I don't know too much about the whole project yet. We've got more work to do with them, but we wanted to share this bit of good news before we talked a little bit about the board report.
Good. Good.
Thank you. Awesome.
I believe you have the board report in your folder as well. Some highlights from it. I'm going to take the first half, and then Dan will take the second. Jim Maishi, our famous agri-science teacher, was highlighted on WCAX as a super senior last month. I hope you had a chance to see it. If you didn't, the link is in the board report. We are starting our registration process this month. Right now, our departments are working on short videos to describe their course offerings because we can't have the traditional activities that we normally have, like the elective fair or some of the information nights that we have for ninth graders. So the departments are working on short videos to highlight their course offerings. And then the guidance counselors are going to hold a question and answer evening on Thursday, January 28th, to help students and parents navigate the registration process. Student Council on December 12th held a giveaway of coats, hats, and mittens that were donated from the community. And so we followed socially distanced procedures and only had a certain number of folks in the Commons at a time, but we were able to, or the Student Council was able to give away coats, hats, and mittens to individuals who needed them. And I don't want to steal the district's thunder, but also the WCAX interviewed our Steve Messier and Kosha about the SEL competencies. So it was nice to get some positive press one right after another with the super senior spotlight that Jim was in. And in January, we have a variety of professional learning opportunities happening. We're working with Jen Patnode, who is a local MTSS specialist. She's going to work with our educational support team twice next week. On January 18th, we have our Martin Luther King Day in service. Our faculty have choice between a Google Classroom training that's kind of like a 201 type training. You've been using it. Here's how you can use it better with a certified Google trainer. And then the other option is youth mental health first aid that we're doing with NCSS. All of our paraeducators are going to be taking youth mental health first aid that day. And then we have an ongoing relationship with Math Best Practices, and they'll be working again with our data teams on January 20th.
Hi, everyone. I have the second half. MVU is happy to announce that we are going to be offering the PSAT to any student that would like to take it. That'll be at MVU on January 27th. This kind of takes the place of the one that we typically offer in October. Just kind of a reminder to people, we have a semester change coming up, and given our current 4x4 model, because of COVID, it's going to dramatically change a lot of the classes that people will be taking, especially high school students. Most high school students will be taking 4 brand new classes, and all of those will start on January 25th. And for middle school kids, if you're a 7th grader and you were taking an exploratory, you'll now be taking your elective. And if you're an 8th grader, you'll now be taking your exploratory. We've also put a copy of the January newsletter in. Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to take a look at the newsletter, but we put a link to that in there as well. We also want to make you guys aware of a new meal distribution plan. If you've been up near MVU, you will see that there's currently a trailer there, kind of a refrigerated truck like we had during the summer. We were originally given out, we had 2 people manning out front of MVU between 4 and 6 every evening, giving meals away to people that would come up. We heavily advertised it. We weren't getting a lot of people for it. We were getting approximately somewhere between 10 and 15 families per night, or about 10 to 15 meals per day given away. We spoke with the Abbey and we agreed to go with a meal box. And in the meal box would include like bread and sun butter and fruits and vegetables and like a loaf of bread. And when we switched to that meal plan, we've actually been having numbers more realistically up in the 230, 250 people coming and getting it on that evening, on just Wednesday evening. So it's a 1 day a week. And they've been using the trailer to kind of house those meals because it takes up such a tremendous amount of room. So it's a meal box. People pull up. They just pull up in front of the trailer. The meals are put in. They just tell us how many they need. And then they can drive right back out the road that we improved for people to come on in and can exit right out on the frontage road. You'll see some upcoming dates there. And one of the things that we also wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of is our winter sports update. Just so that people are aware of this, the winter coaches meeting will actually be tomorrow. We are expecting high school sports to start on the 7th. That'll be this Thursday. And sports games would actually tentatively start somewhere around the 16th. For hockey, though, it would be the following Wednesday. Middle school practices are going to start somewhere on the 9th. Games are still to be determined. I think a lot of schools are still trying to figure out what their high school schedules are going to look like before they start figuring out what their middle school schedules are going to look like. But more than likely, middle school games will start in early February. For both high school, for both JV and varsity, games are going to be broadcast via Channel 15, Facebook Live. The same with the rink. They were just up there yesterday, testing all the equipment, making sure that everything worked, and it looks like everything's going to be a go. Middle school games will also be broadcast, but we're waiting to find out whether they're going to be live or recorded. We just don't know whether everybody's going to have the possibility to be able to live record those at, say, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The goal, though, is to be live. And as always, any updates to athletics can be found on the website, mvuathletics.org.
And Dan, the governor still hasn't given the official okay for games, correct? Just practice.
Correct.
But
Correct.
all of the scheduling is
Preliminarily put in place just in case things were a go.
right, so that you're not scrambling later.
Exactly.
Okay.
But there are 4 game schedules. John's been working on those. John Lumpson, the athletic director, has been working on those and does have a plan. Like he was just yesterday morning plugging in game schedules. So you should be able to go onto the MVU website and take a look at tentatively what it should look like.
Great.
And that's it from us.
Thank you very much. Any questions for MVU administration? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll move on to the superintendent report. Julie, you're muted.
Of course I am. Trying not to make ambient noise every time I turn a piece of paper or something. So, thank you, everybody. We have a fairly light in terms of updates from other central office administrators because I wanted them to enjoy the holiday. But we will have reports out from curriculum and special ed and early childhood, et cetera, in our February newsletter. We already spoke a little bit as we were getting ready for the meeting. As you know, we had a meeting December 15th where I shared with you our plan to have our remote days on January 4th and 5th, just in case we had staffing issues. Of course, and this will surprise absolutely no one, the governor, as could have been predicted, on the 22nd, changed his guidance. So I think we were really well positioned. Having made our decision early, families were appreciative of having the notice. They were appreciative of knowing that they had a little bit of time to make family plans, to take a test if they needed to. Teachers had the same understanding. And then when the governor sort of loosened a little bit around what a gathering was, that really did help us. So we met as an admin team yesterday. And while we certainly have some staffing challenges, we were also not sure if we would have a lot of folks having to quarantine. We have had something like 130 cases in Franklin County in the past 14 days. But we really haven't had much in terms of affecting school staff. So that's been, we feel pretty lucky there. And I really didn't feel too badly about 2 remote days, given that our elementary students, for the most part, have been in school 5 days a week when all of their, those in other communities have been remote at least 1 day a week, right? So I feel as if we've been giving our students that extra in-person day as much as possible. So I thought it was a fairly prudent decision. It was not easy, but we knew we knew it was going to be tricky. So I really want to thank the principals. I want to thank Bonnie Moulton, for all of the work they did informing people and communicating to make sure that everybody knew what their options were, and that the message from the school was, we want kids in school, please be responsible. So that feels as if that was the message that was received. So I hope you had a chance to see it, but I did include, for no reason other than it was cuter than anything, a picture of Santa Claus visiting through the window at the Highgate Preschool. It was just the cutest thing I had seen in the longest time. So please make sure you get a picture of that. The fact that they're all just together looking with wonder through the window just was delightful. And it was a nice way for the children to have a physically distanced with Santa Claus safe little visit. So that was nice. And thank you to Wendy for getting that to us. So really the bulk of the meeting today is really devoted to talking about budget and talking about the promotion of the budget. I put a little information to you of the kinds of things we have planned to move forward with. One of the things that we want to discuss tonight, and my hope is that right now I can get people to agree that we will have a sort of town hall, modified town hall meeting next week, probably Tuesday, because Tuesday is the day that works for most people. And we would use it to get input from the community before the budget is adopted. We really need that budget adopted in terms of timeline by the 19th. That makes the most sense in terms of preparing ballots and annual reports. But one of the biggest things that people have, the biggest pieces of feedback has been, well, you give us your budget hearing 10 days before town meeting and it's too late for us to do anything about it. And obviously that's in statute and we're required to do that, but it's not an opportunity for input. And we have tried to make sure people really know that we're working on budget right now. I put up a little one-page flyer. Psat nicely had it go out with the agendas so that it was posted in places. We put it on Facebook. But people tend not to come to the board meetings, but hopefully they will. If we market this, we'll have a little presentation where we go over some of the survey information and the input people gave us so that we can talk about how that sort of is reflected in the budget a bit. We're not going to do a big, long budget presentation, but, the big pieces, what the total number is, what the tax rate information estimate looks like, that kind of thing, and have an opportunity for questions, an opportunity for comment, and an opportunity for people to, I'll probably create a little survey where people can just write their thoughts down, right? And also have all of your emails. And then we have a central email that just comes to, I think, Psat, and she would forward it to whoever. So, a variety of ways for people to give input. We may not get a ton of folks, but just the opportunity for people to come and say, hey, I think we should have more of this. I think we should have less of that. I'm worried about my taxes, or I'm worried about how many teachers we have. I want more investment in our facilities so that our HVAC is clean. Like all of those things. It's wonderful to have that opportunity. So I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. We met with Devin over the holiday break, and then Laura and Robert and I met after that. And Laura and I have been meeting since then on, ways that we can get some of the school specific information out there without creating a Swanton budget and a Franklin budget. I almost said Fairfield. A Highgate budget, an MVU budget, because it's really deceptive, and it's moving backwards. But at the same time, people want to know how many teachers are in my school. What does it cost for those, for the staffing in my building? How many students are there? Those kinds of questions. What are some of the big things that are happening in Highgate or Franklin or MVU that I can, I want to highlight in this budget? What are some of those costs? So we're going to put together a series of short videos that we're going to need your help with, because as delightful as I am, people really want to hear from you and from the principals. So we're going to have, for example, one of the first ones we'll do will not be so budget focused, but I think it's going to be COVID focused, because a lot of people have questions about the impact of COVID on our budget, on our spending, on what's happened for students. They may or may not know about our use of transportation to get food to families over last year, the kinds of grants we went after, the kinds of changes of expenses that we had. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And frankly, there's a lot of good information about what our teachers and staff and administration did through this whole time. And I think it's important to get that out too. And then again, we'll have some school-specific information that will go out. We're also looking to have an insert in the messenger for those folks who are not going to watch videos on Facebook or on our websites, but they're going to want to look at things in the newspaper. I think that's very important, and Laura's been working with them already on what that'll look like. Usually the messenger meets with me and we do an article. And we're going to, of course, have a formal budget hearing and presentation as well. So, you know, the virtual, people don't come to a lot of the virtual meetings, but I'm hopeful that with the input session, the one that we're required to have, and then videos with lots of, if you have questions, here's who to call, here's who to email. I think that is going to keep us very busy. And I know I'm missing something. I didn't read this, it to you. Laura has a very detailed timeline that's color coded that is in the folder we'll probably look at later. It's pretty jam-packed. So I will be emailing you. we're not going to sit here on, I would like to hear, would next Tuesday work for folks to do a meeting?
I have a work obligation until 8 o'clock.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be the full board, right? It's no decisions are being made, but we got to get the impact in. So we'll send an email out tomorrow to see if we have enough folks. I drafted a presentation. Laura has been fixing it a little bit, you know, just as a way to start the conversation and then get input. It'll probably be an hour, but I think it's an important step.
Starting at 6 or 6:30, Julie, are you thinking?
I don't know. What do people think? Will people be home early enough by 6?
I think probably after dinner.
Yeah, I think 6:30 would probably be good.
6:30 is a little better for families to get home and sit down at the computer. Okay. All right. So we will do that. You can see the little flyer that I created. I will do something simpler and punchier for next week, and we'll get that out.
So Julie, will you and Laura be presenting, or how is that going to work?
Well, I was thinking I would reach out to a couple of folks. I will be happy to present the part about the survey. And then maybe we can have different board members present different slides. Might be just asking a question. So I can maybe get a couple of volunteers to help with that, so that we can do a little practice run. And then I will moderate the questions. So
let me tell you why I ask. I mean, I want to know. But, you know, last year we did the presentation, and I think it was on town meeting day. Yeah. I got this question and I just filed it away and said, no, it's not relevant now. But I think if we're going to have board members speak to things, certainly should work you and Laura, but I think every board member should have an opportunity, because last year the comment I got from people, one person mentioned it, but another one was standing there and said, I agree with him. It appeared that some board members knew a lot about the budget and other people knew nothing, and that was far from the truth. because I know some of the people that didn't speak and they're very knowledgeable in the budget. So I think if we're going to use board members, which I think is an excellent idea, everybody has to have some involvement because it's a board. It's not a Swanton budget. It's a Valley School District budget. Let's go that way. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And for this one, I think that it would be too much if every board member spoke, but my ideal is that we have at least 1 or 2 board members at each of these little small videos. So I'm going to call up Peter. I'm going to say, when are you available? This is what the little slideshow looks like. Which slides do you want to read? You want to read this one? Okay. It'll probably be, Dawn and Peter and Steve, right?
Don't put me on with Peter. Oh, no.
Match made in heaven. So, I want, for that very same reason, Don, I want to make sure that we have a variety of board voices.
Oh, absolutely. Different towns too. And
yes, exactly. Because even if we're sharing, what's happening in Swanton, we'll have the principal there. The principal can read, and will work with me on what they want to share about theirs. So, yeah, it's going to take a lot of work because if I were just sitting in a room doing it, I could just hammer them out in a day. But nobody wants to hear me. They want to hear from all of you. Hopefully we can have the facility guys read the slide about the facilities that they're building. So, the facilitation of it, I think. And then Robert very nicely is going to edit us so we all look smooth and professional. So I will be reaching out to you all this week. I'm going to try and have a timeline. I'm going to have a little template that I get started and work with the principals, and we'll set up little recording sessions.
Terry.
Yeah.
This is great. So it's not going to be live, the presentation itself. The question and answer period will be, but you're going to have it edited from the recorded beforehand and Robert's going to edit it. Is that what you're talking about, Julie?
Not for next Tuesday.
Not for Tuesday. Okay, because I was going to say that.
Tuesday will be live.
Okay.
But a little presentation about MVU and what's happening there. What's the staffing look like at Highgate? What are the changes happening in Franklin? Those presentations. Most of our budget is centralized. So what does that look like? We're trying to be very careful because you want to be transparent, but where do you put positions if it's something that's shared? We're working through all that because it's not as simple. The special educators are in central office, but they may work in Highgate. So where are we going to represent them? We don't want to double count things. But we're working through it because I think it's really important. I mean, Devin was advocating really clearly. People want to know what's happening, what are the big things in their building, and they really want to know about staffing, and they want to know about how many kids, those kinds of things. Those are the big tickets for each building. So we want to make sure that we get at that.
That's great. Thank you.
So yeah, it's going to be, we're going to do the best we can. Now, if we have emergencies, then I may need to scale back a few things, but hopefully everything will go smoothly.
Megan had a question.
So will this replace what we've done the last few years where we meet at the studio and we go through the presentation at Access?
Yeah, we're going to have a final, we'll have a final presentation that we put together ourselves. That will be the whole thing, because I think it's kind of hard to go into the studio right now. We can do the same presentation. It won't look as pretty as Channel 15, but Robert will do okay. But it won't look as fancy. That's for sure. But we will. I think it's just safer, and it's hard it's a lot easier for people to say, yeah, I'm available at 7:00 on a Wednesday to read some slides and we'll record it, as opposed to, having to take time off from work and do it that way at Channel 15. Definitely we'll go back to them in the future because they do a great job.
Okay, any questions or comments?
So Chris,
Don?
I have a number of budget questions. Is that fair game for tonight, or is that at some other point, or is that on the agenda and I missed it?
It's on the agenda under new business,
New business.
FY22 budget draft review.
Right. So we wait until we get there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going over my report where I basically focused on budget. I did want to share with you the enrollment information. It's there for you. It's a point in time in the fall enrollment. So I shared this year's enrollment along with sort of the plus minus of how many students we are up or down in each building total. And just because it's a weird school year and we had a lot of students move to homeschooling because of the pandemic, and they just did not want students in the school building, and they didn't really want the virtual learning opportunity. We did lose a lot of students. About 46 students were new to homeschooling this year, which is almost twice as many. So I shared that along with the enrollment. Almost everyone that has spoken to our principals that is new this year has said, we're only homeschooling for the school year because of COVID. Things go back to normal. We're sending our kids back to MVU, back to Swanton, et cetera. So I just wanted you to get more of a total picture that way of what our numbers are looking like. And we're pretty lucky. We've been pretty steady with our enrollment numbers. Highgate is the exception. They've been decreasing pretty steadily over the past several years. And our budget, of course, has been making adjustments along the way because of that. But overall, we've been holding steady, which is pretty good because not everybody in Vermont is in that situation. So we've been pretty lucky. And finally, I just have, Robert sent out reminders because at this time of year, there are a lot of scams out there, and you all have MVSD emails. So I wanted to share with you some of the things to be careful of. He always is telling us to reset our password. So I just shared some of that with you so you could all be careful. And that is what I have for superintendent update today.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions for superintendent updates? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And first up for new business is the MVSD Central Office finalized lease agreement.
So I was sharing with why is it not here? Well, I can't do two things at once. I did move it in there yesterday, but it seems to have moved itself out. I will put it back in again. So some of you will remember it was so long ago that it was Eric Beauregard who said, let's have that lease go to our attorneys so that we can double check some of the language. And we did do that. And then I started some conversations with the landlord last February. COVID happened. We met again in April. He said, don't worry about it. We'll continue. So we've worked back and forth this end of the summer. He and I had several conversations. We were negotiating some of the language. Always the landlord has certain articles that are very important to him. Our attorney is always trying to get language that he thinks is the cleanest or the best. And through it all, we really negotiated in good faith. Some of the language that we felt was most important to come out did come out. Some of the language that he felt was most important to come in, and it wasn't that important to us, we let that stay. So we have a really good agreement we feel comfortable with, and we're looking for your approval and authorization for the board chair to sign.
Peter, I just see you unmuted. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. So I assumed you were going to be looking for a motion. We talked about this last night at our meeting for the task force for the facilities. We reviewed the agreement, the lease agreement, and after having the attorney look at it, I am certainly comfortable with it. So I would I'd be willing to make a motion to accept this 3-year agreement, which I believe ends on February 1st, 2023.
And authorize the board chair or vice chair to sign it.
Correct.
Peter's the first and a second.
I'll second it, Pete. I'll second it, Chris.
Don's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of authorizing the board chair or vice chair to sign the 3-year lease agreement for central office, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you.
So that, just for clarification, that 3-year lease, we've already completed 1 year of that. We're just, okay.
Yep. Okay, next up under new business is FY22 budget draft review.
Okay, and I did ask Julie to send out a better version of the budget draft with notes because the one I added got fuzzy when I added it to Google Drive, and I apologize about that. So you should have an email that includes that file. This time I also included a budget summary, which rolls up all the grant funding and other kind of the funds into the centralized functions, and object codes are all rolled up to the by the 100 as we would present possibly in some documentation when we're marketing, or just another way of looking at things. May prompt some different questions. So just getting used to different marketing materials and different views of the budget. The overall increase for this budget draft has not changed. It's at 1.93%. Really, we've been working through technology has been the biggest, the technology instructional budget and administration budget that we have. So I've been working with the tech directors again. Robert has spent more time with me than he probably likes to do the past week or so. And we've been streamlining costs and literally have created inventory of every software application piece of equipment that we have. Are they being utilized? Are they underutilized? Are there duplications? What's the cost? Do we pay once a year annually? Do we pay every 5 years? Can we streamline things? So kudos to him for putting in a lot of work there with his tech team members. So the biggest changes you'll see in this budget are with the tech instruction line and the tech administration line. We've also had to change where we're funding things based on the new business rules. So a lot more expense has been moved to the administration side and centralized to MVSD as a whole. Sometimes there's some cost savings there, but overall it's just the appropriate place to apply the charter accounts. Some of the savings also is we're looking to lease all devices this year and roll the leases into one. So now that we are MVSD and we're kind of, I wouldn't say ahead of the game, but we're better prepared now. We've been merged for a longer period of time. We are trying to enter into a 3-year lease that's consolidated, and that should allow us to capture a better rate on our lease. And also, over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge decrease in the cost of devices that we purchase. So Chromebooks are much less expensive than devices that we used to purchase. iPads you can get for $305, I think it is. And they last quite a long period of time. So 4 to 5 years, depending on the device. Teacher devices as well. We're encouraging Chromebook use where possible. Even MacBooks, when we do find those to be appropriate, the cost has come down probably 35 to 40%. So I've worked through that with Robert. We've looked at what the needs are across our buildings, and we've made adjustments there based on what we've historically had in the estimates that we have been receiving from vendors. The other thing, so that was a little bit of a decrease, about $18,000 overall. That was offset because we've just received the new Vermont municipal retirement rates. I included a little chart here just because I find it interesting. This is support staff that there's both an employee and an employer contribution on. That is different than Vista's, where only the employee pays, other than the healthcare contribution. So just a little bit of information there, but those rates do increase typically every year as of late. And so that ate up the $18,000 that we found, just within $600 actually, in technology. But other than that, we just continue to review, adjust, keep looking at lines, look at historical expenses, and we'll continue to do that right up until the last minute on the 19th, just to make sure that we're capturing everything appropriately. I do need to continue to work with the facility directors over the next 2 weeks. I would say that their budget and their funding codes and their structure has changed more than any other area, and it's just a larger budget. It's a huge part of your budget, so just making sure that we're properly funded there. We also, as the facility task force could probably fill you in, we had a meeting last night. There's a lot of things to consider with the facilities. We have normal repair and maintenance that we're trying to appropriately fund, but we also have a bond in Highgate that we're looking to utilize. We're looking into performance contracting. What's the appropriate increase to a budget that we can accommodate? So all those things have to come into play. So it's just a lot of discussion there. We'll continue that right up till the 19th, to be honest, working with facility directors. Other than that, in this budget draft, that's about all I have to talk about, unless we want to move on to the tax rate page, because I did, this is the first time, and I apologize that it's much later than usual, that you're seeing an estimated tax rate, and it is estimated for sure. We are guessing at a lot of things right now. We can get into that after, but.
Yeah, so you want to talk about the revenue side of things before, and the tax rate information before we jump into questions about the expenditure budget or the budget as a whole.
Whatever the board prefers.
I'd like to hear the tax rate estimate.
I think it sets the stage for the.
Sure, and if you don't mind, I might project that just because it's easier to talk my way through it, and I really do want people to understand what is solidified and what is still yet to be decided. So let me just bring that up.
So while you're bringing that up, as of now in this draft, our proposed expenditure budget for FY22 is 38,636. Is that 636, Laura?
I don't have I'm looking for my other file. Something's funky with Google Drive today, Julie, because you're missing files that I can see, and now my file's missing.
Excellent.
And I just put it in there, so.
Let me look. 38,636, 542, which is an increase of $730,000, 313, for a 1.93% expenditure increase over FY21. So that's the bottom line of this proposal. Things have changed. We've added, as people have wanted to add things, we've found places to experience savings, move things around, but the bottom line on that budget has not changed much in the last few drafts.
All right, can you see my tax rate page now?
Yes, can you make it bigger so that people like me with their glasses on can read it?
Yep, is that good?
What page would you be on? Is there a page number on that page?
I don't have a page for the tax rate. That was, this is just something I added to the drive. It's a single document, and I'm not sure what's happening because I literally added it sort of 30 minutes ago and it was there and now it's gone.
It's in the folder, just the shared drive folder. It's not in the January 5th meeting folder. So it's just up one level, but it is in there.
Okay, good. Maybe, sorry about that. But, let me pull that back up. Okay, so
estimated revenue and tax rate, that one, I'll download it and email it to the board just in case they
thanks.
Need a copy.
So you'll see the comparison of current year, fiscal year 21 and 22. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this. Is typically what we put in the book, different versions of this. So overall projected expenditures are up to 730,313 in this draft 5. If we go down here to revenues, and that's really why we're looking at this, you'll notice unreserved fund balance, and that's a huge item here, because you'll see that this big number, 3.2 million. It is a large carryover. That's due to the fact that we basically stopped spending when COVID happened in March. So there was a quarter of the year there or less that we basically were not spending anything. We continued to pay people, but we're anticipating grant funding to offset those costs. And we basically froze spending on top of the fact that we did have a few unfilled positions and lower special ed funding and such. So we have this larger carryover. I want to point out that that is an unaudited number at this time, and this is our first audit going into MVSD, where we merged $37 million. Our auditors, I talked to them today, they're pretty comfortable with this, but please bear in mind that that's an unaudited number at this time. They're working on the audits as fast as they can, is what they told me today. Anything else in blue here has been updated. These are very typical revenues that we anticipate to offset your taxes every year. You'll notice interest earnings, that's more realistic with what we received last year. Federal grant funding up a little bit, and that's based on some additional grant funded positions that we're anticipating at MVU that we are proposing. Special ed costs, the special ed reimbursements, are down. Anticipated revenues are down a little bit. Well, the mainstream's up, but this one that's based on reimbursement of expenses is down, and that's because our special ed costs are projected to be down. Part of that is because we are trying to position ourselves well for the census block grant that's coming, where we know we will see potentially a reduction in special ed revenue coming to our school district. The early ed grant for early childhood. So then we get to our projected revenues. You'll see that our projected revenues are actually up to 2.4 million. That's primarily because of the 3.2 million carryover. Ed spending, that gives us an ed spending when we take that away. That's down about almost 1.7 million. It's a great place to be, in my opinion, right now. Many school districts are not necessarily in that place. Then we get into the tax rate calculation. So equalized pupil, as we know, is the divider here. This number is by statute supposed to be to school districts right now. We've been given some ADM numbers, but those ADM numbers, due to the new way that the data is collected by our tech team, many school districts are struggling with that data collection, and then the state is struggling with the information that they have. So
Laura, I just want to say one thing, because when she says our tech team, she means the Agency of Education's tech team is struggling. Our tech team submitted their data accurately and on time. I just want to make sure that was clear.
One of the first ones, actually. Yeah. Rescue is amazing. So equalized pupil numbers, I'm using, even though due to COVID, the ADM is frozen, they're using 2 different years of ADM. And so instead of 1920, they're using 2021. Our ADM was down about 8. But I don't yet know the rest of the weighting factors that is calculated by the AOE. So I believe our equalized pupil number may be a little bit higher than this, which would be helpful, but I'm anticipating worst case scenario. But as I said, typically we would have better information at this time. Last year it was late, this year it's later. So not much I can do about that yet. So then we get our spending per equalized pupil. That here with this draft, it would be down $839. Using the property yield that was announced in the commissioner's letter, the homestead yield of 10,763. Hopefully that would be a worst case scenario. That would give us, it's down $235, would give us a unequalized tax rate of 1.3738, which is almost 5 cents less than the current year. We then apply CLA information, which unfortunately is not good for tax rates. So you'll see those numbers here. It's good because our base tax rate is going down by almost 5 cents. But if you look at these CLAs over here, CLAs are dropping significantly, especially in Highgate, which has a negative impact on the tax rate. So you'll see the impacts here, the changes here, I'm sorry. But in Highgate alone, the reason that they are having an increase of almost 3 cents rather than a reduction as the others is because they dropped 5% in their CLA. So if I change this number, the CLA number back here, it actually has a 7-cent impact, just the CLA itself, a negative impact. So most important thing, this all looks great. Primarily, we're keeping the budget proposal moderate right now, and then a combination of that with the unreserved fund balance being high, not a significant drop in the equalized pupil really compared to other school districts, puts us in what I think is a pretty good position to start. But I just wanted to explain that there's still moving parts in this calculation. So hopefully we'll have a little bit better information on the 19th. We'll do the best we can before we have to finalize the budget.
I have to say that Laura and Becky and I have been having conversations about, what estimate to use. And all along, Laura has made the decision to use a more conservative estimate, so that we're trying to present what would be a worst case scenario should a piece change. So she's been very cautious. I've worked with boards in another land where, sometimes there was, well, let's just change our estimate for tuition pupils or something, and we can make it look better. That's not the case here. It's everything from the revenue being generated to the equalized pupil estimate, et cetera, has been very conservatively estimated.
Devin.
Thanks for all that, Laura. It's good to see the tax information. I will say that the one thing that jumps out there on there to me is actually concern for not this year's budget, but next year's, when we don't have that large carryover, because it's essentially you think of it as a one-time buy down of next year's tax rates, which will then recover next year plus any additional increase we're going to add next year. And so, to see the rates come down this year is great and feels good. It makes me concerned that we will be one of those districts looking at a 9 or 10 or 11 or 12% increase in the year following, because we're kind of artificially low with that reserve. So I don't know, Laura, if you guys have, or Julie, or anyone with more experience has seen this kind of thing before, and how you handle that kind of multi-year issue that it creates. I'd like to hear a little bit about that if anyone's got any insights.
Laura, do you want to respond to that a little bit?
Karen wants to speak first, though, and maybe.
Before you do you mind if I just ask you something? Because I really agree with what Devin just said, and I'm hoping that there's something we can do to offset it, because I know when we listen to the state giving us information, they're saying that they're surprised that it's not as bad this year, but that they're anticipating next year is going to be even worse. So I'm with him totally on this, and I'm hoping there's something we can do about this to make it maybe not hurt so much next year and maybe hurt a little more this year, just to help reason things out.
And Julie and I have talked about this, and our BASBO team has talked about this. There's been a flurry of emails from school districts that have historically budgeted very, very conservatively, or have had a cap on their spending, or lots of different reasons. And they are looking to go to the voters to ask to utilize a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount of their projected carryover from last year and from this year, and kind of earmark that for as a
capital reserve,
as a well, not a capital reserve, but as a reserve as a buffer that they could utilize just for that purpose in a different year, because their normal practice doesn't dictate that, so they have to go to voters to ask that question. I've thought a lot about that. I don't have a magic ball, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know that this issue is not going away. But I also feel pretty confident that we've been extremely frugal this year, and extremely efficient. We've been promised grant funds. We've applied for grant funds. We have ESSER funds, CRF LEA funds, CRF HGRAT funds, food service money, and we've cut our spending significantly. If positions didn't need to be filled, we haven't filled them if there wasn't an absolute need. Supplies, materials, equipment, the extra COVID funding, we have grant money theoretically to pay for it. Do I have it in the bank yet? No, but I have awards saying that we're getting it. So I'm not fearful about this year's carryover. I would hope that we can end this year with a fairly significant carryover, maybe not as significant as last year, but more significant than what would be a typical carryover. If the board's not comfortable with that, we could look at doing, a special article to try to, do what other school districts are doing. I don't know if that's, when Julie and I have talked, I don't know if that's necessary for next year because of where I think we're going to end up this year because of our conservativeness. I feel like we may consider that for next year. But that's my opinion. I don't know all the factors.
Yeah, and we've been pretty cautious in this budget not to cut unnecessarily. Last year in particular, we cut something like 10 professional positions, a number of support staff, and it all made sense. We were very careful in our pruning. But to your point, I keep asking Laura, do we have enough cushion? Do we have, let's not cut unnecessarily too close. We want to make sure we have room for emergencies. We have room for unexpected things because life has been pretty unexpected the last couple of years. And we want to make sure that we're not having a funding cliff like you're describing or a tax rate cliff in a couple of years.
Dawn.
Yeah, I want my voice to join Devin's and Terry's. That was one of the first things on my list other than expenditures. I know we're living at a different time, and so I have to respect what information Julie and Laura get. But in the old days where the state was less involved, we would have looked at this and said, we're going to save a third of it or a fourth of it and ask the voters to let us. And there was a time you didn't even have to ask the voters. The school board would say, we're going to keep a third of this and invest it or whatever and have it for the following year so you don't keep bouncing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll listen to our administrators, but I would feel a little more comfortable if we did look at that number and maybe say, let's set 25% aside of it for the next time around. But I'll support whatever the majority wants. But since that was one of my concerns, I felt it was appropriate to add it to their voices.
And again, it's definitely something we've been talking about. It is definitely a concern for me for fiscal year 23.
Okay, I saw a lot of hands go up, so I'll say Steve, Jen, and then Devin. That's the order.
And Joanne's hand was up too.
Ooh. Oh, sorry, I didn't see Joanne's. Steve, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Okay, we'll move on to Jen while Steve figures out his mic.
Laura, thank you for this. I know I reviewed it earlier as well. Would you be able to possibly add a column onto it where if we did reserve, like Dawn said, a quarter of it, what it would be at the projected tax rates after common level appraises adjustments? Would we be able to see what that would be? Add another column, just so we know what it's going to look like. What we would I
can tell you, I took out 300,000. I think it was points. I just playing with numbers, so I took 300,000 out of it when Julie and I were just chatting, and I think it was 0.7 cents. So it doesn't make as huge of an impact as you might think, unless you're talking giant dollars. But yes, I mean, I can play with it. I can definitely do that with different scenarios. Again, it is something that would have to be approved by the voters. So you can run the two scenarios and propose it that way, but you're not guaranteed one way or the other unless something's approved. That being said, COVID is changing rules. So, and changing statute and regulations. And so we know a lot of that's being discussed right now. But that's where it stands right now.
Right. I just maybe the voters would want to see that. I know I definitely want to see it. I know times are definitely different now. So if the number jumps too high, I know with COVID and loss of jobs, people may be less apt to want to have something higher this year and hope things for the better in the next couple of years. But it would just kind of be nice to see where that would be at.
Okay, Steve's wrote in the chat, are we allowed to accrue?
Sorry, I lost my screen. Only if we ask for permission. So we can go to the voters and say, you know, different school districts are looking at different things. They're looking at utilizing percentages to buffer, you know, changes that might be not that they can't forecast right now for upcoming years. And then yes, up to 5 years, or they may be asking for a percentage or a flat dollar amount to establish a capital reserve fund because they know that budgets are going to be tight the next couple of years. So there's many different ways to do it. My understanding though right now is that all of them would have to go to the voters to request permission to do that.
Okay, Devin.
I think Joanne, I'll let Joanne go first if that's all right with you guys.
That's fine by me.
So mine is easy because it's basically what Jen had asked. And I'm just going to repeat the answer. If the voters or we were, you know, playing with the idea of reserving 300,000, then we would, so Franklin would increase by roughly, so then it would be a positive 4-cent increase. Highgate would be at 10 cents and Swanton would be roughly at 6 cents. Is that my understanding? So you said a 7-cent increase. Am I putting it in the wrong spot?
No, 7/10. Oops. 7/10 of a cent.
Oh, so not very much.
Not much at all.
No, it doesn't.
Not much at all.
There's so many other factors that come into
definitely
play.
something to consider. That's my opinion. But
And I'm going to double check that 7/10 of a cent. I just had to pop the number in while you guys are finishing your.
Okay, so I'm good. My question was the same as Jen's. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think 7 cents would be a big increase. I mean, okay, thanks.
So I just wanted to maybe throw out a number actually for the board to consider. Just kind of, I was filling around with the numbers, and if we, instead of using the 3.2 million, knocked that number down by about $1.5 million, we could get to the same spending per equalized pupil as our current budget. And then any changes then to the tax rate would be based on the state figures of the CLA and the property yield. So that's about half of it, which would let us step down and keep that, you know, same spending per equalized pupil, keep that flat. So just something I thought I'd throw out there.
I personally like your thinking because that's what first caught my attention. Wait, we're spending less per pupil when we're traditionally the lowest spending per pupil. And, you know, sometimes you get rewarded for good behavior by having something bad happen. So I do like the idea of looking at that cost per pupil and kind of keep it and see how much that would raise taxes. I would really support that. I think that's very brilliant, Devin.
So the 300,000 was actually 1.5 cents, and I apologize. I was playing with lots of numbers. I can throw in the $1.5 million if you'd like to look at that.
Peter.
I'm just trying to understand what we're talking about here. So are we trying to bring this back up so that we don't have to raise as much in taxes next fiscal year? Is so it won't hurt so much? Or is it, I just don't want to, I know we have a lot of carryover, and we're talking about not putting that back, so we'd have to raise more taxes to make up for that. I don't want to not give the taxpayers a break, and then, you know, we're in this, if it's not going to help us in the next fiscal year. I want to understand it better before we make that kind of jump.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm concerned about too. I mean, we know we're impacted by what every other school district does. There's so many uncertainties right now about when grant funding is coming, what year it's going to hit. You know, there's all this new coronavirus relief funding coming in, but literally Bill Bates, the CFO of the Agency of Ed, has written to us that, yep, there's a bunch of money. We have no idea if it's new money, old money, how it's going to be applied, when you're going to get it, if you have to apply differently, if we're just going to give it to you. I mean, that was what we gave on Friday. So it's tough to predict what's going to happen. I know there are many school districts that are in a really poor place right now. Again, I'm confident. I mean, I think, you know, we can look at another financial report at the end of the month and see where we think, if the grant funding does come to fruition, where we think our carryover this year is going to be as well. And that might help with the situation. Just so you're aware, it is about a 7.6 cent change to the non-equalized tax rate with the 1.5 million.
Sorry, say that again, Laura.
7.62.
So taxes would be going up, not staying stable.
If we're no, the change in the tax of the 1.5 million is 7.62 cents.
So we should add that to the 1.37 that's on here. Is that
you would go to 1.45 and some change.
Gotcha.
So it would be an increase.
Yeah.
An increase over what you're seeing here because you're decreasing your revenues. Yeah, so your net ed spending is going up 1.5 million.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it would be an increase to the not equalize, you know, the tax rate, because we're at 142 right now.
But it wouldn't be a 7 cent increase. What
No.
would it be?
Right.
When you asked me to do that, I was saying the 7 cents is due to the 1.5 million. No, it would be like a 3 cent increase to the tax rate.
Yeah.
Overall from last year. The impact is 7 cents of that amount of money if we take it out of our revenue.
Because I would hate to see us go over more than 3%, 3 cents tax rate or something with everybody hurting so much this year. But it, you know.
Can I take a shot at answering Peter's question?
Yes.
About kind of why we're talking about this. I think that the simple example is that, you know, if we think forward to the fiscal 23 budget, so not the one we're going to vote on now, but the one we'll be voting on a year from now, you know, imagine that's kind of what it's going to be. You know, the spending is what it's going to be at that point. And imagine we're going to need to have a 5% increase compared to what our FY21 budget is. So over 2 years, imagine we're going to have to increase that by 5%. So we can have 2 avenues to get there. If we use that entire carryover in that middle year, we could reduce our taxes by 3% next year and then have to go up by 8% the following year. That big kind of down and up swing. Or what we could do is try to smooth that a little bit. And go up by 1% and then the 4%, or even, you know, if we have sounds like we have room to play with that if we wanted to, in terms of how much carryover we ask to use and ask to reserve. So, you know, we could say, let's try to stay flat on our taxes and then just go up the 5%, or, you know, go up 4% and 1% if we wanted to use almost none of the carryover. But so that's kind of what we're talking about, is how do we smooth that transition from our current FY21 budget to that ultimate FY23 budget where we don't have the flexibility of this kind of large carryover. Is that helpful?
So Devin, if we are projecting a significant carryover going into 23 from the current fiscal year due to COVID and all the grant funding that we're potentially receiving, would the idea be to continue that model?
I think we need to know what that number is. I don't think we know enough to determine that, but you know, my general feeling is I don't I don't want to create those enormous swings and that big yo-yo effect on our ratepayers, because that's just so hard for taxpayers and families to plan for, to have a big decrease followed by an enormous increase.
Like I said, that's come up a lot. The other thing that's come up is if a handful of school districts move forward with that this year and more move forward with that next year, then that is less money that's coming into the ed fund to offset the ed fund moving forward as well. So what would the impact of that model, if everyone starts doing it, due to the projection of the yield, which impacts everyone in the state? So that's a lot of what's being discussed right now is, and I'm not saying that we should be the sacrificial lamb by any means, because we've done that enough, but that's kind of the other side of the coin. Is we're all, we meet with the AOE and they say you're supposed to be a team player, you gotta, but just sharing that other side of the coin.
You know what I would say to that, Laura? I would say, fine, once we reach a certain level cost per spending per pupil, then we'll talk about all playing on the same level field. I agree with the team player, but you have certain, we're being so frugal.
Right. Unfortunately, though, where that yield gets set will impact us no matter what. That's the unfortunate part, but it won't have as a significant impact as 1.5 million potentially could, so it's not.
Exactly.
Chris?
Don?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to where we were a few minutes ago with Devin speaking out and then Terry. I would like to get some sense, if we're all on board, that we don't use it all this year, carry over. And then we can figure out whether we run it the formula backwards or whatever to see how much we're going to use. I just think using it all this year is a mistake. I think we've got quite a few things on the table. I'm not quite as aggressive and liberal as Devin is to go to half of it. But I think that it'd be a big mistake to take and not try to spread this out over at least the next couple of years. I've been around long enough that cliffs really hurt, and you lose a lot of support with people when all of a sudden they see this big hit and they think, don't you guys know better than that? So some way, however run the numbers to get it, whatever the magic number is, I would just like to sense before we leave tonight, are people on board to say, we don't know if it should be half like Devin just had on the table. I think I said a third or a fourth. I'm not hung up on the number. I'm hung up on how we're going to make it work so we don't have a cliff. I think the other thing to remember is this is a taxpayer's money and they'll have to decide. We can sit around here tonight or in 2 weeks and say, we're going to use it all, we're going to use. And then, of course, we used it, but part of it, it is a taxpayer in the end who has to be educated and says, yeah, these people really thought this through and they know what they're projecting. They don't know. They're projecting how it's going to impact us next 2 years. So, okay.
This is a new model for me as well. We've never been in a position where we've had this significant of a carryover that we've had to be concerned about. So I would like time and add to that the COVID situation to call the people that I know at the AOE, call the auditors and say, what are their caps on this? What would the potential article language look like? Are there any recommendations or things to watch out for? I'd like to have the opportunity to do that too.
And I do think it is an opportunity next week to present to the community a couple of scenarios and the rationale so that we can get input. It doesn't mean the board is the one who makes the final decision in terms of what you're proposing to the voters, but to get a little input of, whether they think that makes sense and whether, answer some questions about why you'd be doing that. I think that's important. And it is important to know that, I do think we will have probably not the same, but we will have a pretty significant carryover going into FY23. So doing something, I think, then adds to that in the uncertainty of what the state budgets will look like next year.
Are we going to have a hard time convincing the voters to give money back when they know we're going to be having another surplus or we're going to be carrying money over again?
Well, I think if we were doing this all the time, they'd say, well, why are you asking us to pass a budget, and then you have $3 million left over? Because it's COVID, I think people understand that we basically stopped spending, except the most essential things, and that, and we got grants to help with some of our expenditures. So I think it's a unique opportunity to do it. I think in a regular year, Peter, it wouldn't be positive, right?
Yeah, but my thinking is Laura's saying that we're going to have money left over from this budget that we're currently in. And we know we had money left over last year. So why would the voters say we'll give some of that back when they know we're going to be having surplus money again this year?
I think what we're saying, and I think Devin articulated it very well, was the rubber is going to hit the road at some point. There's tons of federal and state funding right now. We stopped spending, we closed schools, we reacted to COVID. That will stop at some point, and there will be a cliff at some point and the problems with the ed fund compounded on that, and the reduction in special ed funding. I can go on and on and on about why the cliff's going to happen. At some point it will happen. It's a matter of when it will happen and how to position ourselves best for that. I think, unfortunately, I won't know by the penny what that projected carryover for the current year is going to be until I get a check in the mail for all these grant awards that we have, and I am assured that they are going to hit our bank account this fiscal year. They say they are, but they've said a lot of things. And now there's new money out there, and I have $890,000, or you have $890,000 available to you in ESSER funds right now, but we have not applied for any because the rules and regulations are still being built. And until I know, we're tracking the costs very specifically, but I'm not applying for them yet, and we're already in January. So is that going to hit my bank account this year, or is that going to hit the MVSD bank account next year? So there's just so many unknowns. We can look at where we are and where we think we're going to be, but unfortunately, we're living in a world of uncertainty to some degree.
Okay, I see your hand, Terry, but Joanne had her hand up a while ago, and I want to give her a chance.
So the only thing I wanted to bring back up, if we choose to present to reserve some of this money, is I don't want to, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. It looks like the town of Highgate already is in a positive increase. Am I seeing that correctly? So anything that we did reserve, if we went, Devin's route with the 1.5, they're looking at a 10-cent increase. Now, Franklin and Swanton's not going to be impacted so heavily. And I remember seeing this last year, but I know Laura or Julie, you would do the homestead value, $100,000 homestead value with an increase of 10 cents. It was going to affect your taxes by X amount of dollars. You would give an example. I'm assuming we'll present that again this year. We'll have those scenarios, if we go this route or that route.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just didn't want to forget Highgate. That's all I really wanted to say, is that no matter what choice we make, it looks like, I guess because of the pupils, they're in a positive already. So, and I know obviously that could go either way come next year from what, Peter is saying. If Franklin was to lose a bunch of kids, then we would be in that same, increase in a couple years. So it's an eye opener for me, what that affects, how the pupil count affects the tax.
Well, the pupil count, we all end up with the same tax rate. In this presentation, before we, with all of the revenue moving into reducing the tax rate, our equalized tax rate there is $1.37. But it's the common level appraisal that is done by town. So in the end, it's about the real estate sales and values of your town That's what makes the difference between Swanton and Highgate and Franklin. The school budget and the equalized pupil result in everybody having the same tax rate. But then it's the common level of appraisal. And that's what we have absolutely no control over. I mean, it's positive because it means that homes are selling, right? Potentially, that they're selling and they're selling at a higher than appraised value. But it doesn't make you feel any better when you open your tax bill. So yeah, I would worry about Highgate getting a 10-cent tax rate increase. That feels like a lot.
And with that 1.5 million, Swanton would be over 6 cents and Franklin would be almost 5 cents, a little over, well, 4.5 after CLA, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Terry.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. I could have gone on for a long time. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that I think that a couple of things. I don't think we should ever give the impression, nor would it ever be our desire, I don't think, to tax people up so that we can hoard money. I think that we're all going at this with the best possible intentions in terms of being more generous rather than not being generous. But we are concerned about that cliff. And like Laura's saying, there's other other divisions, or what do you call them? I can't even think of the name right now, but other supervisory unions, other districts in the state that are having more trouble. And so, overall, we are going to have trouble. I mean, it's very clear that the taxes, somewhere there's going to be this issue. So I think that all I'm thinking, and maybe this is where, Don, I think was you asked for some kind of agreement. I think that we all agree that we want to spare taxpayers as much pain as we possibly can. And I wouldn't be advocating, and I bet Devin would neither, that we have a 10% raise for Highgate or something if we wouldn't have to. And I think we're also advocating that we try to be prudent as people are budgeting to not have anyone go over that cliff if we can help it, by the way we do this. So I think we're really balancing an understanding that people need relief as much as they possibly can. And not just this year, but going forward a little bit, there's going to be an issue. That's all I wanted to add. None of us, I don't think, are advocating that we would raise anyone's taxes if we didn't have to, or that we would do so and hang on to money for future years. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Terry. Not seeing anyone else's hands raised. Any more comments, questions, concerns?
So it looks like we'll be meeting next week. We'll do a presentation and input session with the board, and maybe we can have a little time beforehand, maybe, to look at a variety of scenarios, and then we'll, of course, then have the 19th as well. And so we'll look at a variety of options.
Terry.
Thank you. I know I'm talking a lot, but we had this discussion. I just wanted to say one more thing, and that is, it's so nice to be able to trust the numbers that you all give us, to be able to know how prudent and how smart you are and how you take so many things into account, that all the managers, admin, and everything else. So that's really a gift, I think, because I feel really strong and credible when I talk to the community that, yeah, we're doing the best we can and we've got great information going on. So I really appreciate that on your parts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so at this point we can move on to, well, we kind of already did it, budget communication plans. I don't know if we need to touch on that again.
Julie, you're muted.
Go ahead. Julie speaking.
Was I? Oh, thank you. I saw Jen's hand up, though. Was that to tell me I was muted?
Oh, no, I just had a quick question. Just because I've been looking at the budgets and the big long spreadsheets, and I'm kind of putting a ruler to my monitors and a little bit. I was just wondering, Laura, if tomorrow during my lunch break or something, can I scoot down and get a printed copy so I can like have it in front of me to mark up? Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll email you.
Normally you'd have color-coded copies by now if we were meeting in the real world.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You sound like you're crying.
So I'm going to share my screen. Laura's the little
Did your girl come in
spreadsheet
today?
we put together. Let's see if this is the right one.
So the spreadsheet that she's projecting is something that is necessary to do now with all the different steps, especially with COVID and virtual meetings. But it basically outlines the timeline, not only for marketing, but warning articles, approving your last version of your budget, ballots going to print, annual reports going to print, when things are due, notifying principals when we need them involved. So try to color code it because that helps me. I thought it would be interesting to you. To see the steps and kind of the timeline that will happen between now and town meeting day. That was just while you were bringing it up, Julie. Feel free to.
Yeah. So Laura, thank you for putting this. I put, sort of an overview in text form in my report, but Laura put the actual numbers together and the dates. She's been in touch with the printers to see if we can have some board reports printed. If you remember last year, we were pretty thrifty and we stapled them and it was a lot of work, and then people complained that the staples were cutting them. So we thought that we would print a limited number of annual reports. That adds some time, of course. We still, because of the organization of the school district, required us to just the article language that we adopted when we organized in, whether it was probably March or April of 2019. We had that article that we would be sending postcards to notify people of the availability of the annual report. Well, it costs like $3,000 to send out postcards, and half of them come back to us. So we can't just stop doing that. One of the things we want to propose is that there's an article for the warning that will say that we will notify voters of the availability of the annual report and make them available. And we have some positive language there, but it doesn't require us to spend money on postcards that apparently are very ineffective. So that's something we wanted you to consider, whether the board wants to do that. But again, the marketing videos, when the reports have to go, when the ballots have to be printed, it's a very tight timeline. So when I give you an email and say, please, we need 3 people to come on a Tuesday, or you don't have to leave your home to record a video or to give some input on these slides, because you're the ones who are going to be reading them. I really appreciate your support with that. And thank you, Laura. And Purette always checks it with a fine-tooth comb because she's been doing this for a long time. Looks like Purette's trying to get your attention, Chris.
Chris?
Yep.
I just wanted to tell the board that in the past, the town clerk's offices used to send out postcards to let people know that the annual report was ready, and they stopped doing it. And so we had thought that we could just tag along with them, and so we use just one postcard and save the money, but they have stopped doing it. So we're the only ones doing it. And if you think about all 3 town clerks are not doing it, I think it just makes sense for us to discontinue doing it as well, and honestly save the money and time and postage and so on and so forth. So I'm just putting in a little promotion to discontinue it.
Yeah, Laura's got a little basket full of last year's postcards that came back to us.
And that's only half.
Do we
So
use
no-
address verification software?
What was that, Megan?
Do we use any sort of address verification software with the post office?
We don't have any such thing. We receive our list as a taxpayer list from the town, and that's what we went by. Last year, we did send to every taxpayer because it was our first year and we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that these were available. So we were overly cautious. That could be why we got a lot back. But to be honest, most people walk into the town clerk's office or to a school to get their copy. We probably had maybe 5 to 10 people come to this office to pick one up. So you send out $3,000 worth of postcards and 10 people come to pick them up. I'm not sure that there's got to be something better that we could do.
Chris, or Julie or Laura, is there any way that each town in their town report could give us a place for a notice that if you want a MVSDA report, because those town reports go out in people's hands, they look at them, where to call or whatever, however we want to do it? Because if we could put that notice, if we could put a notice in their town report, that's about as good a way of notifying people that I could think of.
Not everybody sends out a town report the way,
Okay.
that's, I'm not muted, sorry.
Pierre, go ahead, Pierre.
To address that, Don, I think we could put out some flyers to make people, besides putting it on the website, of course we would do that. But I also think we could put out flyers, put some in the town clerk's offices, because a lot of times that's where they go to pick up their annual reports from the town. And we have a flyer there, and obviously our report will be there probably at the same time. But we can, if not, we can put out flyers there, flyers and maybe in other public places in town, letting people know the annual report is ready. Please come and pick it up at your town clerk's offices, and we'll have multiple places where they can come and pick them up. And so we can certainly make that, publicize that well without doing postcards.
Both Highgate and Swanton have lighted signs with messages. There's no reason why we couldn't run a message on those two boards saying that the MVSD report, where it's available, how you can get it.
Yeah, we certainly could do that too.
Yeah, so this year we are bound to do postcards, but we would like to put a warning on the ballot so that we can change that and be a little bit more efficient.
Terry.
This is probably a stupid question, but I thought our school report went into the town reports. Is that different now?
Since we merged, it's different. Yes, we do our own report.
We can't just have. It's not the same. That I would think Swan would have our school report in. I would think every town would want to have the school report in. No.
No, we're a separate municipality, so we are obliged to have our own report.
I'll miss that.
And there's, the relation to the town budget is separate now. So
that is so funny. I can just see me going into the town. What happened?
What happened to the school part?
I'm a little behind the times. You can tell I leave during the winter. Thank you. I used to anyway.
Okay. Not seeing anyone else's hands raised. So I believe we can move on. Yep. Okay. So next up is old business, and first up on old business is the roof contract amendment.
So we no longer need that on the agenda. I kept it on the agenda in case I received some more information up until this moment, but I did send out some updated information to the task force this morning based on the conversation you had asked Scott to have with that roof contractor, and it was positive. I don't know if the task force member wants to elaborate on that, but we don't need a motion at this time.
I can elaborate on it. We had an issue with the white building. We had approved to do the first phase with just part of the roof. They tore it off. The building's very old. So instead of using plywood sheathing, back then they used just boarding. Well, over the years, 60, 70 years, boards shrink. So what's happened is there's gaps in between the boards. So when the warranty for the new shingles that we're going to put on require a solid substrate in order to be mounted on, we don't have a solid substrate because of the boarding. We got an estimate from the contractor or a change order to do plywood over the boarding so we could get the warranty with the shingles and whatnot. But it was a very sizable increase to the estimate. And if once we did the entire project, it almost doubled the project. And as a task force, we discussed it last night quite extensively and come to the conclusion we don't want to chase a warranty that's, for lack of a better word, useless. And especially since we don't know the longevity of the white building. We're going to do a lot of looking into that and research this coming spring and summer. But as of right now, we have no idea whether that's a long-term building or a more of a short-term building. We have no idea. And we just didn't feel it was good money to put into it. That being said, we've asked the contractor to go ahead with the original plan and tear off the old shingles, put a performance paper underneath, flash it correctly, and put shingles back down. And I believe now that is the plan. We won't get any warranty for it. So I guess the downfall to it is if the shingles blow off next year, we're liable for it. But that being said, that roof's had a shingled roof on it for years, and this isn't the one that's on there now was put on in '92. So it's I mean, we've kind of proven that it'll stay there. So we didn't feel it was good money to spend, so we chose not to. So that we don't need a motion for, so scratch that one off. Any questions regarding the roof? I'm not seeing any. Okay. So next up is under old business is check warrants.
You have the check warrants for the month of December. I don't know if one of the finance committee members wants to read those.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. The warrants are pretty high this month, so maybe Laura can give us a little background on them. Accounts payable is showing at $1,222,154.24. Payroll checks 148.15. And payroll other disbursements 1,501,901.37. And payroll deductions at 542,339.18. Total is $3 million this month, 311,542.94. I'm assuming, and Laura, back me up because you're great. I'm assuming it's year-end stuff.
It's Northwest Counseling bills and Blue Cross Blue Shield hit in certain cycles, and those are huge. But then also Anne Marie worked her little tail off to get things paid so that she could take a day off for Christmas.
I get it. There was a lot of stuff earlier in the month, and the last vouchers that Devin and Megan and I saw was kind of low. But there have been some pretty big ones earlier in the month.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to accept the check warrants as read. Megan's a first. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting check warrants as read, raise your hand. The motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Let's see, under old business, COVID-19 financials update.
Okay, I included the report like I do every first meeting of the month. Additional COVID expenses that we're tracking have come down significantly. So, the severity of those is not has decreased as we've started school, and students have what they need and teachers have what they need for the most part. Obviously, we continue to purchase PPE equipment and sanitizer and all those things that the costs have gone up. But you will notice, as you did last month, that I have moved the COVID expenses for grant awards that we have received, not funds that we've received, but awards that we've received. Now we have to submit all the documentation and reimbursement requests to get that money, have been charged directly to those grants. So as you look through, you'll see CRF LEA, CRF HVAC, CRF food service, and those are the ones that we've charged directly to the grant in hopes that we'll receive offsetting revenue. About 1.6 million total, some of that last fiscal year, some of it this fiscal year. And then about $300,000 past that. Now we've exceeded that now, that we will be charging to ESSER to look for ESSER reimbursement. But trying to get one thing done first. So we're looking to get that settled, and then we'll move into ESSER when we have CRF settled, and we still have time for that. So, and potentially we might move it into the new CRF money when we get the rules on that. But if anybody ever has any questions when you're looking through that, please just let me know.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions, so we can move on to other business. First up under other business is an employee leave request, which we may need executive session for this. Julie, you're muted.
I really have to do better. You'd think I'd do better by now. I do think we should go into executive session just because each individual, while they're not lengthy or complex, they are pretty personal. So, and they were only just put in your drive this evening because I wanted to chase down some emails to put it in there. So we should probably have a finding to go into executive session to discuss confidential employee matters.
Chris, before we do that, I have a question.
Sure.
Back when we were doing budget, we started out with expenses and then we went off into other areas, which was really good to have that discussion. I don't know if other people had questions on expenditures, but I had some. And what I'm suggesting is if people have questions about the budget, that they email those questions to Julie or Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would ask, like, if I send in 3 or 4 questions, when the answers come back, they could be shared with everybody. So that if I'm asking, you know, why is the guidance down? I think it's because we probably didn't have it fill a position. Doesn't look like we're refilling that position now. Am I wrong, Dan or Jay? But it looked like we are down a position in guidance and are going to stay down a position in guidance.
Actually, that one, I was supposed to get back to you on that one. We had, when we were budgeting last year, there was a retirement and there was a potential change in the model, and that's what we had budgeted. So we had over budgeted. So the extra difference that you're seeing is because of that budgeting, not actuals. So they were not down.
Okay. Okay. So the model, I remember when we decided the model wasn't one, but I thought that eliminated. Okay. But anyway, if I have that type of question, I send it off. Other people may be wondering the same thing. That's all I wanted to ask. And the other thing is, if we are going into executive session, there's one issue that I would like to bring up from last night's facilities meeting that I think is a contract issue. I think it qualifies under a contract issue. So I'd like to add that to our finding.
Okay.
You'll get it, Julie.
What's that?
I'm just looking at Julie's face and saying, she'll figure it out.
Okay.
Okay. We're not quite ready for executive session yet. We still have some more agenda to go through, but I'm not seeing other questions. So the next up is task force updates. And the first one is board goals.
I'm going to let the rest of the group talk about this, what they want. I know we kind of took a break over some of the board development, and we thought, okay, well, we should look at budget during this time. And Devin's been doing the heavy lifting on that one. So if he and Joanne and Megan want to add something, that'd be great.
Well, I'll say Laura and Julie and the team, the administrative team, have really been doing the heavy lifting on the budgets. But you know, I think in terms of the task force, we have been talking about the budget, and I think what Julie's described in terms of the presentation process really is what's come out of that. So I think we've really had the full update on that, and I think then Terry will be ready to schedule our next meeting and continue with the other stuff when budget's completed.
Okay. Anything more? Looks like everybody's all set. Okay. So next up is the facilities task force. Like Don said, we met last night. We went over 4 major topics. One was the Highgate roof, which we've already discussed. Another one was the central office lease, which we've already approved. Thank you. Another one, we really started kind of digging into the capital improvement plans for each building and starting to work through what that's going to look like in the next year. The facility directors have done a great job putting together an immediate need, 1 to 5, 10 to 15 year needs for the buildings. And then the big thing, we kind of had a kickoff meeting for EEI. Mike Davey was there and explained the process and how things are going to start since we've approved the RFQ. The first meeting, our first on-site visit, is going to be at Highgate and MVU on 18th, if I remember rightly. And they're going to assess those 2 schools first because they're kind of the low-hanging fruit, I guess, for possible savings, and not to mention Highgate has the bond and stuff like that, bond funds to be able to use towards improvement projects. So that's where they're going to start, but they are going to focus on all buildings in the district this spring. Peter, Don, welcome to fill in anything I left out. Peter gave me a thumbs up. Don said we're good. So we're good on the task force unless anybody
Can I just add one thing that I think is important? Sorry, sure. Just briefly, that they're bringing an engineer with them that is kind of the guru in New England for space usage.
Yep.
And she's known very well for that. And Mike Davey is bringing her along to look at Highgate and meet with Julie, the principal, facility director, and Chris, I believe. So that's great to have her as a resource. I'm really interested on what she has to say.
And the reason why is she's going to look at if we can utilize without the white building. Obviously, that's the first obstacle we're trying to overcome. But at the same time, they're going to look at all of our buildings and see if we can use the space we have more efficiently. Let's see. So unless anybody has any questions for any of the task force, which I don't see any, we can move on to future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be January 19th, also held virtually at 6:30. So at this time, unless somebody has a further add to do, I would entertain a motion to go to an executive session to discuss employee leave request and a contract issue. Terry. Oh, sorry. Terry was the first, Steve was the second.
Good, I was thinking I had to say something. Thank you.
And we're going to invite in Julie and Laura. Do we need Laura?
Well, I'm not entirely sure about Don's question, so Laura might be helpful.
My question is just information that requires only Julie.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll invite in Julie and the rest of the board. So all those in favor of going to executive session, raise your hand. Whoa, my screen flipped around. 1, 2, 3. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're back out of executive session. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the reduction in FTEs as discussed in executive.
So moved.
Peter first, Megan's a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Unless anybody has something to add, at this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Terry and Peter, first and second. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:33, raise your hand. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Happy New